let's start with three teams that I just thought did an outstanding draft. Okay, so draft grades. I'm not going to give like Fs and this team didn't do well. I'm not going to do that. I want to talk about three teams that I thought had outstanding drafts. Okay, let me start with the one that everybody's been talking about and for good measure, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles came into this draft with the luxury of having one of the best, if not the best roster in all of football. Okay, they signed their quarterback to that monster deal, and good for you, Jalen Hurts. I absolutely love that for you. And they're sitting there with a couple of picks in the first round. What a luxury that must have been. And this Eagles franchise got way better. And the best part about having a great roster and having, in particular, a couple of picks in the first round is that you don't get locked into the need category. So this team was able to just sit there and select great football players. So a lot of why I love this draft is for one, because of how they came into this draft as the best roster in football, at least in my eyes. And so here they are, and they get Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the first round. I mean, what? At 9 and 30, no less. You know, if they're trading up from 30 and they're getting Nolan Smith and they've got to spend some draft capital, that's one thing, but they didn't. If they've got to spend more draft capital, and I understand that they moved to get to 9, but Jalen Carter on the Philadelphia Eagles is terrifying for everybody else. Terrifying. This defense is all of a sudden, it's like, hey, just bring in Kirby Smart on the microphone. Because if you don't know, and most people don't, Kirby actually is on the PA, on the microphone during practice all the time at Georgia. Yelling. I mean, just on it. Guy's a madman, and I love it. It's part of the reason why his defense plays with such urgency, right? Detail. All of those things. They've got great players on that defense at Georgia, so why not go and steal those great players, draft those great players? So here we are, a year after taking Jaden Davis, and they've got all these Georgia players, and then Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith at 9 and 30. I mean, Eagles select three Georgia defensive players. They take Kelee Ringo a little bit later. They're able to get Tyler Steen, the offensive lineman from Alabama, Sidney Brown, one of the best safeties in all of America from Illinois, and a guy, by the way, he's one of the toughest players available. So this defense gets better. Their offensive line gets a little bit more depth. It's like, are you serious? The Eagles are going to be the NFC East favorites, the NFC favorites, and quite frankly, maybe even the Super Bowl favorites. Now, granted, they don't have Patrick Mahomes, and yeah, that's tough. But they do have Jalen Hurts, who was an MVP candidate, and they had an outstanding draft, and I absolutely loved it. All right, a couple of other teams that I really liked. Let's talk about Houston. Houston's boldness and secrecy for that number 2 pick was outstanding. There was so much being talked about in the lead up to the draft about what Houston was going to do. There was a lot of smokescreen about the fact that they didn't love C.J. Stroud and maybe they wouldn't take him and maybe it was going to be Tyree Wilson. Was the pick available? Were they going to trade it? Then there was all of a sudden some of this like, well, maybe they'll take a defensive player and then trade back up and back into the top 10 with their second pick in the first round. I believe it was 12. And lo and behold, that's what happens. And by the way, kudos to Daniel Jeremiah, a friend of the program, as you know, and a great friend of mine. Guy on a mock draft predicts the exact trade. Are you kidding me? Daniel Jeremiah is one of the best people in the business, and he's certainly the best draft analyst in the business. So he nails it. C.J. Stroud with the second pick, trade back up to number 3 with Arizona, and they get Will Anderson. So here they are, and they're sitting there, and they got the best quarterback available to them in C.J. Stroud, and a quarterback, by the way, that there shouldn't have been a lot of debate about, in particular if you listen to this program, and you know exactly how I feel about C.J. and his potential. But then they also get what was my best player available in the entire draft. My number 1 overall prospect was Will Anderson. And they tried back up, and they get C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. So kudos to the whole Houston organization for the way that they handled this, the secrecy involved, and quite frankly, the smoke screens that were thrown up, because not a lot of people outside of Daniel predicted that, and it was tremendous. By the way, the team that they traded, I would be remiss if I didn't mention at least Arizona. And while I'm not going to bring them up specifically as one of the three that I really loved, Arizona did set themselves up really well for the future. They get an offensive lineman to block for Kyler Murray and Paris Johnson, which is the guy that they wanted anyway. So you move down and get the guy that you were targeting all around, all the time, and they get a second first-round pick next year. And judging by, listen, I mean, I love Houston's draft, but Houston likely is going to have a top 5 or 6 pick. The way Arizona's roster is right now, they might have a top 5 or 6 pick. So you might be staring at a scenario in which the Arizona Cardinals are going to get to take 2 of my top 4 players in my list that I'm going to give you at the end of the program. I mean, they're looking really good for next year. So there's a little note on Arizona. And then my last team that I want to talk about, in terms of a quality draft, was Pittsburgh. I really loved Pittsburgh's draft. They got good football players, and they made their organization better. And they draft with discipline, and they get Broderick Jones in a nice move in which they kind of move up and get Broderick Jones. I like that for them because they needed offensive line help. They get to block for Kenny Pickett and obviously protect him, and that's good. Then they get Joey Porter Jr. in a move in which I wanted to make in my first-round mocks. So I think that there was some good value there, and obviously, tug on the heartstrings. Are you kidding me? Joey Porter Jr. to Pittsburgh? Let's go. Then they get 3 players in the subsequent rounds after that, and I thought these were really good picks. Keanu Benton, defensive tackle for Wisconsin. Good player. Really good player. And he's going to be a good pro. Darnell Washington. He had some injury issues, and so people were shying away from him. They get him with great value. He's a solid tight end, and a guy that's basically a 6th offensive lineman. And then Nick Herbig, also from Wisconsin. He's a good linebacker. These are perfect Pittsburgh-type draft picks. I think all of these guys are going to play, and hopefully they play for a long time. This is one of those drafts that I think Steeler fans will look back on and be like, boy, those are all guys that can be cornerstones of our organization, and I really like that. So those are the 3 teams that I would say had really great drafts. Eagles, Houston, and Pittsburgh, and then watch out for Arizona next year.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.